The United States government has conducted several types of mind control experiments, ladies and gentlemen, some of which were real-life experiences, such as those used on Little Augie, which we described last night, and the LSD experiments in the safe houses of San Francisco and Greenwich Village. Experiments on prisoners, such as the California Medical Facility at Vacaville. Many experiments were conducted in both mental hospitals and the Veterans Administration hospitals. After our soldiers were injured in war, they were further injured by our own Veterans Administration and government personnel in the intelligence community. You see, they believed that psychosurgery would inevitably be performed in connection with the program, and that since it irreversibly impaired people's emotional and intellectual capacities, it could be used as an instrument of repression and social control, which was the true aim of all of this bullshit. The doctors wanted screening centers established throughout the nation, just like they had in the Soviet Union. In California, the publicity associated with the doctor's report aided in the development of the Center for the Study and Reduction of Violence. Both the state of California and the LEAA provided the funding. The center, folks, was to serve as a model for future facilities to be set up throughout the United States. The director of the Neuropsychiatric Institute, that's the Neuropsychiatric Institute, and I'm going to say it again, the Neuropsychiatric Institute, and chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at UCLA, that's the University of California at Los Angeles, Dr. Louis Jolyon West, and I'm going to say that again, Dr. Louis Jolyon West was selected to run the center. You're going to hear a lot about Dr. West, for he is an infamous villain. Dr. West is alleged to have been a contract agent for the Central Intelligence Agency, who as part of a network of doctors and scientists gathered intelligence on hallucinogenic drugs, including LSD, for the super-secret MK Ultra program. Dr. Timothy Leary is another. Like Captain White, West conducted LSD experiments for the Central Intelligence Agency on unwitting citizens in the safe houses of San Francisco. He achieved notoriety for his injection of a massive dose of LSD into an elephant at the Oklahoma Zoo. The elephant died when West tried to revive it by administering a combination of drugs. Dr. Timothy Leary, in the meantime, addicted the entire youth of a generation known as the hippie movement, who were making waves with their ideas of living in a peaceful world. They had to be discredited. What better way to discredit a generation of young people than to addict them to drugs and at the same time use them as guinea pigs in mind control experimentation under MK Ultra? The letter read, "Dear Stubb, I am in possession of confidential information that the Army is prepared to turn over Nike missile bases to state and local agencies for non-military purposes. They may look with special favor on health-related applications. Such a Nike missile base is located in the Santa Monica Mountains within a half-hour's drive of the Neuropsychiatric Institute. It is accessible but relatively remote. The site is securely fenced and includes various buildings and improvements, making it suitable for prompt occupancy. If this site were made available to the Neuropsychiatric Institute as a research facility, perhaps initially as an adjunct to the new Center for the Prevention of Violence, we could put it to very good use. Comparative studies could be carried out there in an isolated but convenient location of experimental or model programs for the alteration of undesirable behavior. Such programs might include control of drug or alcohol abuse, modifications of chronic antisocial or impulsive aggressiveness, etc. The site could also accommodate conferences or retreats for instruction of selected groups of mental health-related professionals and of others. For example, law enforcement personnel, parole officers, special educators, for whom both demonstration and participation would be effective modes of instruction. My understanding is that a direct request by the governor or other appropriate officers of the state to the Secretary of Defense, or of course the President, could be most likely to produce prompt results. Some of the planned areas of study for the center included studies of violent individuals, experiments on prisoners from Vacaville and Atascadero and hyperkinetic children, experiments with violence-producing and violent-inhibiting drugs, hormonal aspects of passivity and aggressiveness in boys, studies to discover and compare norms of violence among various ethnic groups, studies of pre-delinquent children. It would also encourage law enforcement to keep computer files on pre-delinquent children, which would make possible the treatment of children before they became delinquents. The purpose of the Violence Center was not just research. The staff was to include sociologists, lawyers, police officers, clergymen, and probation officers. And with the backing of Ronald Reagan and Dr. Bryan, West had secured guarantees of prisoner volunteers from several California correctional institutions, including Vacaville. Vacaville and Atascadero were chosen as the primary sources for the human guinea pigs, and these institutions had established a reputation by that time of committing some of the worst atrocities in West Coast history. The Violence Control Center was actually the brainchild of William Harriman as part of a pacification plan for California. A pacification plan for California. A counterinsurgency expert for Systems Development Corporation and an advisor to Governor Reagan, Harriman worked with the Stand Research Institute, the RAND Corporation, and the Hoover Center on Violence. Harriman was also a Central Intelligence Agency agent who is now serving an 8-year prison sentence for his role in a CIA counterfeiting operation. Counterfeiting operation. Could that be the real source of all these supposed counterfeit $100 bills that they're using to justify a currency exchange? He was also directly linked with the Iran-Contra affair, according to government records and Harriman's own testimony. In 1970, ladies and gentlemen, Harriman worked with Colston Westbrook as his CIA control officer when Westbrook formed and implemented the Black Cultural Association at the Vacaville Medical Facility, a facility which in July experienced the death of 3 inmates who were forcibly subjected to behavior modification drugs. The Black Cultural Association was ostensibly an education program designed to instill black pride identity in prisons. The association was really a cover for an experimental behavior modification pilot project designed to test the feasibility of programming unstable prisoners to become more manageable, and as you will see, ladies and gentlemen, to program unstable prisoners to leave prison and commit terrible atrocities. Let me break this story right now, because the Kaji people have been going full-blown into this. We have investigators all over the country looking into Waco. We had people on site when Waco was happening, as you all know, all of you who listen to this show all the time. What we have found, ladies and gentlemen, is that during the years that MK Ultra was being conducted by the Central Intelligence Agency, the Seventh-day Adventist Church furnished volunteers for mind control experiments under Project MK Ultra. Now, this went on for many, many years. We also know that Jim Jones was connected with MK Ultra, along with a whole bunch of other strange things. Now, I can tell you right now that David Koresh and Mark Bro were both connected to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We've been able to connect these people directly to Louis Jolyon West, who is professor at the Neuropsychological Institute at UCLA.
Oh, actually, he's not. He was just relieved for embezzlement.
Oh, he just, okay, so he's not. He was also one of the prime doctors in connection with Project MK Ultra, along with a lot of other people, including Barry Taff, who's a frequent writer for UFO Magazine, and who actually set Vicki Cooper, the publisher of UFO Magazine, up with an apartment, and didn't even know her when she arrived in Los Angeles after coming under the witness protection program after blowing the whistle on the Mayflower Madam. This thing goes all over the place. And when David Casolaro was talking about an octopus, we here at Kaji are beginning to know exactly what this guy was talking about. And coincidentally, he was writing a book that he was going to name Behold a Pale Horse, which is the same name that my book is called. So we all have an understanding of this that goes much deeper than most of you may understand or realize. This whole thing is very strange. We know that David Koresh went to Israel where he studied the Talmud. We have information from sources that while he was there, he was trained by the Jewish Defense League in infantry tactics. Not just him, but him and a couple of his followers, men, and that they came back to the United States. And so this is not just about some little drug lab that used to be on the property that the Branch Davidians occupied, although it may have something to do with the ultimate outcome. We've also found out that there was a tunnel leading from the house of the Branch Davidians down to a little dam across a drainage ditch, which could have been used as an entrance and an exit way. And talking to some of his family members, apparently during the siege, somebody used this to enter and leave what they call the compound, the church area. We also know that on the Linda Thompson film, you can see agents with their hands in the air backing away from this same drainage ditch, backing away, not away from the Branch Davidian buildings, but away from the end of the tunnel toward the Branch Davidian buildings. Now, watching this like everybody else did, I didn't understand which way they were backing until I began to really study the film and the layout of this property. What have you got to say about all this, Linda?
Well, it gets curiouser and deeper. We've got the connections that you just pointed out to the MK Ultra project, and I was working on that from a completely different perspective and pretty much came up with all the same things you came up with. I had heard originally that maybe this whole thing was a mind control experiment, and I just scoffed it off. I thought, oh man, that's out there with the loonies, I'll put that definitely aside as a possibility. And in checking this out, it all returns to that probability now rather than impossibility, because this Louis Jolyon West was and is an experimenter for the CIA. He's written 12 different papers that I've found so far on brainwashing, mind control, and cults. and he has experimented with implants into people's brains, LSD and hypnosis, brainwashing techniques, and being able to manipulate people through different types of sound waves and microwaves that can be pinpointed to portions of the brain to make you respond in a specific way, passively or actively, for instance. And he was one of the consulting experts during the Branch Davidian siege.
Yeah, that's
It's just the very fact that he was even around makes me wonder why.
Really?
Why was he around? And then why did we have a British spy plane brought in? Why was there this international involvement? Why do we have the guy who was the so-called detective following them around for 2.5 years? Why was he hired by the law firm that represents the Mossad? And why was Cult Awareness Network involved in this and using as their experts people such as Louis Jolyon West? He's called Jolly West. Terrible nickname if I ever heard one.
For him, yes.
The great mind control experimenter. That's a direct connection between Cult Awareness Network and the CIA, and we know that the ADL right now is being exposed as a covert agency of the CIA, that they gather information on people and groups. So we've got the same little snake's nest again behind everything. Now why? Why this particular little group in Waco? Why were they targeted? Why were they so important that they all needed to be killed? What was it they were going to reveal to the world that would make them worth killing?
Well, maybe I don't know if they're going to reveal anything to the world or not, but I will tell you this. It involves much, much more than a bunch of local politicians involved in the methamphetamine lab. It goes all the way around the world.
Well, it really does, because just look at we've got an Australian connection to this thing, we've got a British connection to this, and we've got an Israeli connection to this, and we know that several of the people that are claiming to be Branch Davidians are government agents. Now, this doesn't make any sense at all unless it is international in scale. It makes no sense that all of these international agencies would be involved in this. But we've got all this tape available, in good quality copies that the investigators could look at, and they turn their noses up at it, and we've got clear, convincing proof that these guys murdered the Branch Davidians with a flamethrower tank. Now, why won't they look at this tape? Why won't they look at this footage? Why don't they have a real investigation? Who's covering it up and who's involved? We know. It goes all the way to Clinton.
It's the arcade game that spawned an urban legend.
It's a game that never was, but for a game that never was, it sure has made a lot of commotion.
A game rumoured to be so addictive, it caused severe side effects in those who played it.
There was a game that you could play that would come into your head, that would affect your mind.
It said players were unwittingly part of a secret government experiment to try and control their minds.
It goes back, I think, to MK Ultra and the Americans in the 1970s when they were using hallucinogenics to try and control the populace.
Shady men in black were reportedly spotted monitoring the machines before removing them, and then nothing. Until 20 years later, when the Polybius legend re-emerged.
Planting the seed and allowing people to have their own monster is much better than me creating one.
The Polybius story starts in Portland, Oregon in November 1981. Video arcades were all the rage. Gangs of American teens descended, desperate to test themselves on the latest releases.
It was loud, it was gregarious, it was exciting. You'd be jostled just to get in the door.
This is Kat Despira, a journalist who grew up in the Portland gaming scene.
What Polybius was allegedly a game dropped on the streets of Portland, basically in the arcades, in a black cabinet, unmarked. It had a rambling series of numbers and letters that moved around the screen.
That movement, it was reported, led to some horrific side effects.
It's alleged that it caused catatonia, nausea, vomiting, suicidal thoughts. However, during the video craze, these things are not unusual. 1981 was the year in America where the great asteroids marathon craze was going on, where guys were trying to hit 60 hours. That sort of marathon playing is dangerous. people after 24 hours start hallucinating. They start having convulsions sometimes.
And supposedly lurking in the shadows, keeping a close eye on all of this, were undercover government agents.
That part's true. There was a lot of illegal activity in arcades that was being monitored by not only government and federal agencies, but by local police.
And how does Kat know this? Well, she was there, playing games at the arcade central to the Polybius legend. But she says she didn't hear about the myth until much later.
My boyfriend had told me about Polybius, saying, "Oh, haven't you heard about this? You grew up in Portland. You went to the Lloyd Center arcade." I'm like, "What? No, I'd never heard of it." And then I discovered, oh, wow, people are saying this happened. Lloyd Center arcade was my arcade. There was no Men in Black. There's no way anything could happen there that nobody didn't see.
Dr. Ken Drinkwater is a Manchester academic who specialises in conspiracy theories.
It goes back, I think, to MK Ultra and the Americans in the 1970s when they were using hallucinogenics to try and control the populace. I think it links to that because people claim they saw it, and then when they went to look for it, they said it was taken away by Men in Black. So I think that there's a lot of it that becomes like an urban legend and a myth, and which is all wrapped up in it. During times of uncertainty, people tend to look at conspiracy theories as an answer to lots of things that have gone on. So as people become more invested in finding out about it, it might have gain more sort of kudos. And that creates the rolling forward and the spread and the tentacles.
Phi Din designs computer games and has been heavily influenced by the Polybius myth.
Yeah, I think that the myth of Polybius is really fascinating. I think, like a lot of urban legends, it's a lot of it's untrue, but it had some elements of truth. A lot of contemporary game designers really focus on this element called flow, which is getting the player to play the game and then go in a kind of trance-like state. Everything else is kind of silent, shut out. You can't hear anything, you can't see anything. It's just you and the game, and that's it. And I think that's very similar to how Polybius has been described.
The origins of the Polybius myth have always been a mystery. In 2006, a man called Stephen Roach claimed to be one of the designers of the game, but offered no definitive proof. As we were researching this film, Kat contacted me to say she had a strong lead on the possible originator.
The person who first said it had to have lived in Portland. There's too much in that legend that is true. It details something happened in an arcade, that kids got sick. We know that happened. Games were popping up around Portland that were in black boxes. That too happened. Portland was a test site for lots of game companies, and test games came in black boxes. Then there's the instance of the police raids. That's true. That happened. That tells me almost definitively that somebody witnessed that and passed that on. And it got embellished over time. What I found out was this guy, Kevin Mannis, in 2001, created an urban legend online about a box that he bought at a garage sale. I immediately thought of Polybius. And I went, Kevin Mannis, wait, Kevin Mannis is from Portland. And I went, aha, I think we're looking at the guy.
And do you think he'll do an interview with us about this film we're making?
You'll have to speak to Kevin Mannis. I think he has the answers.
Many urban legends simmered for quite a long time before creatives like me came along and said, well, let's see if we can push it a little bit more.
This is Kevin Mannis, a former actor, now writer and self-styled interactive storyteller.
With any of these stories, you have a seed of truth, but it has to then, grow and develop.
The emergence of the internet created the perfect platform for Kevin and storytellers like him to hone their craft.
When you reach a certain critical mass, you start to get not just that people are interacting, but that the story is actually not just taking life, but taking form or giving form. That's a magical thing that I have no explanation for, but I've seen it happen over and over again.
You seem like the perfect kind of person then that would create the Polybius myth.
I think that it sounds like something that would be right up my wheelhouse. Yeah, quite a bit.
Is that a yes?
I would definitely be that kind of a writer. Yeah.
Is Kevin telling the truth? It's impossible to be certain. His claims could merely be another arm to the Polybius myth that has continued to spawn over the last 2 decades. One thing we do know is the Polybius tale has inspired many other creatives.
It did influence art in a way that I didn't think that it ever would. It's creatively allowed people to explore a different side of video gaming. I've heard it in music, I've seen it on TV and TV programs. It's romantic. It's a legend that comes from a dark and rainy town where nothing really happens.
It's often said everything happens for a reason. But when an event takes place that we can't explain, conspiracy theories emerge to fill the void. The Polybius tale is a classic example of that. A story with a kernel of truth that becomes more embellished each time it's told, leaving the truth in its wake.
There's nothing more scary than the things that lurk in the shadows of my reader's mind. Planting the seed and allowing people to have their own monster is much better than me creating one, you know?
This is not military technology, this is something else.